Hello. After I come back from an outing where I've spent time with others, I come over here, I light my candle. Mostly lighting the candle is just so that I can burn my Palo Santo. And then I use the smoke to bathe in a bit. I can also use Palo Santo even when I stay home, but I don't feel as like compelled or wanting it as much, when I'm just home in my own space. I actually have a room spray that I also use at home. The room spray is spring water. I believe it's spring water. I might have used tap, but I think I use spring. And lavender essential oil and cinnamon essential oil. So that mixture just cleanses the energy in my room, and you can just feel the difference, right? It feels fresh. And what I do is I actually go through my house and spray it onto any of the fabrics around my house, like my curtains. And I know some people might be opposed to putting oils on their curtains and stuff, but I'm not really opposed to it. So anything fabric, even my screen door, like my door is set up so that I've got a screen on the inside and then like the doors on the outside. And I just spray the screen down because the screen can hold, the scent as well. And any like area rugs in the bathroom, the curtain in the bathroom, the curtain in here. Spray my chair down because my chair has a cover over it. My bed. I don't use that for my body. Sometimes I'll use like a rose spray that is actually I feel like I need to go get it in order to describe what I'm talking about. Edgar Cayce is a famous psychic who shared how to raise the vibration of water. And so the rose water that I use has been through that process. I actually don't use that as often. I don't know why that is. But don't get me wrong, I love my outings, I love my people, but especially today, since today I re-implemented hugs. I used to be big on hugs, always a hugger. And I'm talking hugging strangers, hugging my family members as I greet them and as we say goodbye. And I stopped, and I was talking to my life coach today, and we were talking about that topic of hugging. And I mentioned that I had stopped, and I was like thinking, like, I wonder why I stopped. And she asked if that thing that we all went through for the past for 2 years there, where there was distancing required or whatever, so-called required, if that had anything to do with it. And I was like, oh, yeah. Not because I was scared, but because other people, I had to respect their desires and wants and rights and all of that. So, yeah, it was because of that. So today I re-implemented it and just spent a lot of time giving out my love and my hugs, giving out my love through my hugs. So especially today, I wanted to make sure I did a little bit of cleansing now that I'm home in my own space. I really like being in my own space, but it's always nice to come back to my space after I've been socializing, It's the same thing of like when you're being in a shadow, when your consciousness is fragmented, it shows you the contrast of what it's like to be in the perspective of divided or separated from your own heart. And then having that perspective lets you know how beautiful it really is to be in your heart space, right? It's like without knowing what it's like without it, you don't really know what it is with it. It's like if I had never been separated from that part of myself, then I never would have known the greatness and the beauty that it is. And it's the same for me when I'm like in other people's space or in public spaces, and then I return to my own space where, like, my space is gridded. I keep it energetically cleansed, so it's just a different feel. And it's nice to be home, and it was nice to be out and give hugs as well, and also to return home with some supplies. I have been going through the process of no longer consuming sugar, and cheese is also the other thing that I cut out. So I used to not consume these things for years, but over the past few years, I had let those things kind of sink back in under the hope that I could just follow what I wanted to eat. And instead of having those rigid rules and asking my body to kind of only take what it needed. But what my body actually did was pack on a lot of weight through the process of eating whatever I wanted when I wanted. And I don't feel like I was too indulgent or anything, but certainly there were times where I probably ate too much of something or another because I just don't feel like I could have gained this much weight without having done that. But overall, I mean, generally, I would say that I don't do that. I don't overeat because I actually literally hate the feeling of a full stomach. So it's time, though, to kind of lean back out of that experiment that I was doing on being able to eat whatever I want, at least until I get some sort of bigger understanding about how it all works for me. And, I get it. I understand how it works on a 3D level, but I'm talking about on a quantum level. I'm trying to affect this change on a quantum level, and so far have been unsuccessful. And so we'll see where it goes from here, right? Like this new kind of thing I've been delving into might help me shift it, and I'll talk about that more if I find success with it. At this point, I'm still in the experimental phases, so. And cutting out sugar proved to be more difficult than cutting out cheese, because about 3 days in, I ended up eating a bit of sugar, and then went back to like, okay, let's try again. And then cheese, though, I was able to say no thanks to cheese the whole time. So I've been off cheese, for, I don't know what it's been now, 5 or 6 days or something. So I got some groceries so that I could make some sushi, because sushi is something I really enjoy, and it doesn't make me feel yucky when I eat it. And although I like rice isn't something that I find my body allows me to eat a lot of without feeling yucky. But the amount that's in sushi, I can get away with eating. And sometimes I'll make sushi without the rice. I'll just make it like a sushi salad, meaning like put the stuff that would normally go on sushi on a salad. And I really like that. But one thing about sushi is I really like it with pickled ginger. And pickled ginger does have sugar. So I will be consuming a small amount of sugar with my sushi for that reason. And I'm okay with it. Completely okay with it. But I do have some ginger, and I may try marinating my ginger, pickling my own ginger with some honey. I'm wondering if that would work, because I'm totally fine with eating honey. I have replaced sugar with honey. Like in my raw cacao drink here, I've got honey. And that raw cacao drink is what I'll turn to if I have like a sweet craving or something. Okay. We'll blow that out. What else is new? Oh, I was thinking about doing another reading about adding fair relating to the relationship. But maybe not exactly that. I'll use my fair relating deck, and I was thinking about doing something about feelings. What is the dynamic of the feelings in between in this relationship, or something like that. Yeah, because I have these cards I got from the thrift shop. And they are conversation cards. And basically they just depict little scenarios where feelings come up, and they have little questions on the back. But I'm going to use them as an oracle, and just read the pictures and the words in some cases. So those are kind of cool. For $1.75, I thought it was worth a try. I've already used them for a couple readings on myself, and they worked great. So maybe we'll do that in this, like if I decide to save this intro and make that a part of it, or I'll do that as a separate video probably. All right, what do I want to talk about today? I don't know if I want to share that yet. I'm just happy. Yeah, maybe I will share it on these terms, where what's happening here on Earth right now, I believe, is more and more we feel pressured to look at our own shadow. So where we have misunderstandings lodged in us below the level of our awareness, they're coming to light. They're coming to light. They're coming to light. And this is happening through all different ways, right? You may be triggered. You may just have a recurring thought. You may just notice a pattern in yourself. However it is, you have your own guides, your guidance, your highest self, a version of you outside of this space and time giving you guidance and urgence, right? That's why it's so important to kind of slow down, be quiet, and listen to those inner urges, because those can guide us, and it's kind of a more direct route to achieve what we want. But like, nothing is ever lost, it's not like you're going to waste time by taking the meandering path, because something there you'll learn, maybe not for this lifetime, maybe for a future one, but eventually it's going to be useful, right? So basically what's being pressed on it within us is any misunderstanding that we hold. And one of the major misunderstandings, which I imagine will be pressed on for a lot of people, is the idea of lack. A lack that, that we're living on Earth and that there's not enough. Because that's a program, right? That's a belief. And that's an impression that we've been given. And it's not true. It's a misunderstanding. Maybe it was just some people in fear that passed it along. Maybe it stems from a time that we felt like that we were in lack, where there was a famine, where there wasn't enough and things like that. But we really have developed ourselves enough that we can just reorganize in order to ensure that there is enough for everyone. And because we are conscious creators, we can create that into our reality. We no longer have to kind of live in that lack place, not because it doesn't exist, not because it wasn't real when we were in it, but because we have evolved enough to know how to be above it. Lack, it goes along with a bunch of stuff that we've already learned about, So anywhere where we've got a misunderstanding having to do with lack, it's probably going to be pressed on. And sometimes that's going to look like losing something, or missing out, or like being saved by some sort of what seems like a miracle in the last minute, or losing everything if you've built things on the premise that is false, and I'm not trying to scare people, because like I've been without, I've been living on the street, I've been, without food to eat, I've been in a down and out place before, and I'm very fortunate to also know that, I got out of that it is possible to get out of that. And I know that the path isn't the same for everybody, but I do know my faith in God and how it works, and I just know that if we allow for ourselves the possibility, then we can line up with it. And I know that there's a lot of evidence to match the reality we've been living in. So there's a lot of evidence of lack in our realities sometimes, and so it makes it hard to believe or trust or even hope for something else. But that's why learning about the laws of the universe is so vital, because once you learn how the universe actually works, how your thoughts become reality, how you believe something into creation, once you understand that, then you understand that if you only ever believe in lack, then that's all you're going to manifest, and you will see proof of it, because that is what you've manifested. Your energy is reflected back to you. So you probably won't line up with being friends with, or even like standing in the grocery store next to people who are living a different reality, unless you have a judgment against those people. Then they could show up in your reality to show you something that you judge. But as far as like, being on the same level and resonance as you, the people who have a resonance that say, I have enough, I am enough, they are not necessarily in the same sphere, in the same, community as those who believe that they don't have enough, that there isn't enough. You know what I'm saying? And then there are those like gray walkers where they can go from one to the other, where they can keep one foot in that lack paradigm and one foot in that abundance paradigm. And I think that's where I had been for a while. And it makes sense to me because, right, like I didn't want to leave my family members in lack when I, and just step out. But to a degree, I had to in some ways. So not going to go into all that right now, but like basically, if we feel pressed on, understanding the bigger picture view can help us know that there's a reason to work towards the other stuff, that there's a reason to kind of do the shadow work, that there's a reason to love ourselves, that there's a reason to believe that there's a possibility of something more, something different, that we understand that we can break out of energetic loops and patterns that had been repeating in our lives and in the lives of the people around us, and that there's plenty of evidence for. Because whatever you believe, you can find evidence of. For real. So that's why it's like when you understand that, that's why you're no longer arguing for who's right. It's like if someone is arguing for their own limitation, then you understand that they're doing that for a reason. They're in some sort of fear or some sort of lack mindset. And by arguing against them and telling them that they're wrong, it's probably never going to get them to surrender the fear, because that's an egoic structure that is probably pretty solid and built from within them. And you're not going to just like knock it down by battering on them and telling them how dumb and wrong they are. It's never going to happen. We can only change our own behaviors. So they would have to come to their own decision to change a behavior, and that would come from within them. So the only thing we could ever do would be like be an example of something different. Now, some people will see an example of something different and then just still excuse it from themselves and say, oh, I could never do what that person does. But that's just going to happen, right? Like, that's just going to happen. Maybe that person's just going to wait until like everyone around them has shifted, till they reconsider that maybe they can do it. Maybe it's worth a try. Something will be their flavor of enticement if they're meant to have it. I remember recently I had a loved one who was kind of feeling down and out. And every time, so in the past, this person had never wanted to take my advice. And I know I'm not supposed to offer advice without being asked. But I really wanted to offer this person at least a tool that they could use to address the issue on their own. And so I kept offering the tool, but they kept kind of shooting holes in the tool. Like from their perspective, they were saying why it wouldn't work. And what I realized afterwards is what that person actually needed was my presence. They needed to be miserable, and they needed me to still like them anyway and still be with them through that misery anyway. That's what they needed. They didn't need me to tell them to be present with themselves. I could have just been present with them. And my presence can actually open their heart. They'll either be present too, or they'll run away. If you open your heart, two things are going to happen. The person that you're with will either open their heart too, or they will run away. Those are the options here. So if we have the consciousness and the presence and the bigger picture view to be offering our presence to somebody else, that's a beautiful, wonderful, ultimate gift that we could give anybody. But I only recommend doing that if you have the bandwidth yourself. Like, if I don't have the bandwidth, right? If I don't have the space in my own energy, if I haven't filled up my own cup, if I haven't given myself everything I need for resources, then I don't have it to give them the presence, right? First, I need to make sure that I have given myself presence, and that's why I'm in presence. I'm not going to abandon myself to be present for them, because that's never going to work. If there's a portion of me who's screaming out for me and I'm ignoring it to be present with them, I'm not really present with them. Presence is an open heart, and in an open heart, there's no part of me that's screaming out. But it's really interesting and very powerful to know that, right? To know that our presence is enough, not just for us, but for someone else when we have it. And, I was kind of sad and after I realized it, that for that loved one of mine, I could have just been present, but obviously I didn't have it at that time, right? Or I would have done it. What else? It's hard. So one thing that's hard is people asking for help. I've noticed, and I know that there was definitely a phase in my life where I wouldn't ask for help. So some people can ask others if they need help, right? Like I say that I'm not supposed to offer advice unless I'm invited or asked to. And that's because I'm a projector. That's because of the way my energy works. But not everyone's a projector. Projector is something I'm referring to as an energy design in what's called human design, which is an experiment going on Earth right now, where we are using our energy in an optimized manner for what we came to achieve on Earth. And my particular energy goes into the core of a person to read them all the way in. And if a person hasn't invited me, it feels very intrusive. They feel a little naked and vulnerable in my presence because of that. So if I start telling them all of the things that are in their energy, a lot of times they will reject me. They get uncomfortable. They walk away. They're like, no thanks. But that's not going to be the case with everybody, right? Like if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, or a reflector or a manifester, it's not going to be the case. You can offer people help. You can ask them if they'd like you to give them some perspective from what you can see, or share a tool that you know about. But because of the way my energy works, I totally have to just like be open to the people who recognize the value that I can add to their lives and who correctly invite me to do so. So if somebody invites me to advise them, but they're doing it from this cynical place of like, they don't respect me and they're just kind of waiting to shoot me down or prove me wrong, that is not a correct invitation for me, because that is an invitation of a person who does not recognize the value that I have to offer. So I can safely decline to give advice to a person like that. And I haven't always, right? In the past, I would have certainly felt confident enough in what I have to offer to go up against somebody who was more like cynical or in doubt, right? Like, in fact, I used to do all my readings and I would say, I don't really want you to tell me anything. I want to tell you what I am getting in the energy. And I don't want clues or feedback from you, and I'm not going to ask you questions, except for, is this resonating? Maybe, and that's how I used to like it. But now I am learning that there may be a lot more value in asking people questions, like how do you feel about that, and things like that, because it's one thing to bring somebody to an intellectualization of an understanding, but if you do that, if you move somebody out of a misunderstanding intellectually, and they leave behind a suppressed or denied or unprocessed feeling that had been previously lodged in there with the misunderstanding, then they don't have the misunderstanding to point to the feeling that needs their presence anymore. So now that feeling is kind of like in there with no real indicator. Now it's going to have to kind of be looked at, or it might be a while before it can kind of work its way up to the surface again, right? So it's really important to kind of have this dialect, like this conversation with somebody about where they're at when I'm sharing something with them, because I don't want them to have an intellectual understanding of what I'm sharing and leave behind a feeling that needs to be processed. It's a tricky thing, because if I'm doing a reading at a festival and we've got 20 minutes and I'm going to like talk to this person and like we're going to like look at a feeling that's like deeply lodged in there from childhood, where this part of them was in hysterics. This person's not always going to want to tap into that at a festival, right? So I've got to kind of really be discerning and feel my way around that energy too. And like what that is for me now is not just going down into the core and digging out and bringing it to light. Now there's a lot more nuance and discernment in my process of doing readings for people, because now I'm more inclined to meet them where they're at instead of digging down into their root to like unearth something that was holding them back. And also, I don't think it was wrong for the time that I did it the way that I did do it, but I also like that I've, through the process of learning, been able to like refine my process of doing so, right? Because that's a different type of person that I can converse with or effectively have conversations with now. What else? Oh, I can show you this. Let's do this. So, the other thing that I got at the thrift store is this. And this ball has all kinds of words on it. And what you're supposed to do, it's supposed to be for learning for kids. And when you toss the ball and the person catches it, whatever their left thumb lands on is the word. And whatever the ball says is the instructions to do with the word. But let's make this a reading right now, okay? We're just going to do it.
Make a word that rhymed.
Make a word that rhymes. And we've got fake. What rhymes with fake? I don't know why that's so hilarious to me. Okay. What rhymes with fake? Okay, so if I were to like incorporate this into a reading, I would kind of want to say like, is when we talk about wearing a mask, right? When we talk about a person who wants to present themselves in a certain light, and we say, oh, they're wearing a mask. I think, I've talked about that in other readings and other talks and stuff. And I think maybe when I've said that, it might come across like negative, like calling that person out as being deceiving or deceptive, or calling ourselves out to be deceptive. But in actuality, there's another way to look at that, and it's that, of course people want to be seen in the best light, right? Because You know, first of all, we wanted to be a good so that we were rewarded by our parents. So we wanted to be seen as good, right? And there's this thing that goes on with like virtue signaling, people trying to signal that they are virtuous. You know, it's about caring how they're seen by other people. And it makes sense that we would want to do that in our culture because we've seen people get torn down just for having a certain view or not agreeing. And it's like a whole bunch of people can get on the bandwagon of pointing fingers, tearing that person down, or canceling them. And that is so dangerous and wrong, right? And so it makes sense that we would be scared to be authentic and to be seen fully when we have things like this going on. And so I would want to say that it's not just that if we're wearing a mask that we're being fake. If we're wearing a mask, we're also being civil. We're also caring about ourselves. We're using a tactic that we know will get us through a potentially dangerous situation in our culture, right? So a mask can also be a means of transportation, right? So it's like that fake it till you make it thing. You know, if I know that I have a hard time coloring in the lines, but I still like coloring, you know, I keep trying and I keep saying, you know, I'm mastering coloring, but and you know, I just keep trying. I just keep trying to do the thing that I want to do. And by repetition, we learn things. So it's kind of like faking it till you make it's not the worst thing you could possibly do. Like sometimes repetition is the thing that helps us retrain ourselves. Okay. I'm just like checking in to see if there's anything else for me to say about that. Rhymes with fake. So I guess the overall message there was like another flavor of fake would be like just self-care and self-preservation. Let's see what else.
Identify the consonants.
What did that say? Oh, identify the consonants. And the word that we got was jail. Seriously, this is a kid's game? Fake and jail. Interesting. Okay. So jail. The consonants in jail. Okay, so what I'm getting from this is like the feeling of being stuck. The feeling, and we talked a little bit about this in one of the recent readings or talks that I did. I don't know if I posted that one or not, but I talked about how being stuck can really just be a time for pause, can really just be a time for restructuring and deep dive, and knowing that when we take the steps forward, they're being taken from that place where we're following an inner urge, that we're following our intuition, and that we feel secure in doing so. Like we've got our own back, no matter what the outcome is. And the moment we start pointing our fingers outside of ourselves and acting like what somebody else is doing is causing us to do something, now we've kind of taken our own power away. We've made ourselves powerless to somebody else's behavior or opinion or whatever. And to tie it into that fake, into that mask, it's like in order to break free from these patterns of feeling like we can't be what we are, and of trying to protect ourselves by wearing a mask of righteousness or whatever it could be. In order to be truly free, what we'll have to do is deal with the parts of ourselves who are scared to be outed, to be ostracized, to be judged, right? And the only thing that can really solve that, to make you stronger than anybody else kind of pointing that finger or trying to cancel you, is knowing yourself. Because you could be locked up in a jail cell, and as long as you know yourself, you could be content and happy there, right? Like, knowing yourself is the most beautiful, fulfilling, it's truth. It's the truth of who I am, and no one could ever take that from me. No one can lock that up. the truth of who I am. It's in my heart, right? It's only my physical body that could ever be restrained. My heart and the essence of who I am, it's all infinite. It will never die. And so being in jail, being locked up, being prohibited by others or canceled, it's all illusion. And so what's, I'm going to say, constant is something that cannot be jailed. And how we get in touch with that part of ourselves. It's the true part of ourselves. It's the part of ourselves that isn't fake. That's the part of ourselves that is infinite, that's in our heart, that is free, and that it's the part of ourselves that we all long to know. One more, I guess. Use the word in a sentence. My thumb was like not really on. I guess it could be on this one. Gab. Gab. Hermes has the gift of gab. And what I want to say about that is the gift of gab is something so much bigger and more powerful and beautiful than I think we often give credit to. And that's because when we say words, when we speak it into reality, we literally are writing the story of our lives. We literally are solidifying a thought when we speak it. We are giving it more energy and more of our time, right? So I feel like the gift of gab is like sometimes something that we can have work against us, especially if we're living in that state of lack. Because if we're always talking about like, oh, this is happening, oh, poor me on this, or oh, poor them on that, or isn't that terrible, or like what one thing I said today? I made comment about the housing situation and the cost of rents that I've seen when I looked, and I made comment of like that's really crazy out there. And like just me speaking that into existence, cancel, clear, delete, would solidify that into my reality. When really I don't want that to be the reality. I don't want it to be difficult for people to find places to live. I don't want the homelessness to increase, and I don't want landlords to have to live out the wrath of their own greed, right? Because that's a karmic thing that they will have to live the other end of. So it would be nice if everyone, will just like be operating in their highest good with the consideration of the win-win-win for all. So I don't want to speak things into existence that I don't want to live out. And that goes for illness. That goes for noticing a lack of anything. That goes for talking bad about someone else or gossiping or anything really, right? The gift of gab, it's like the things that we utter. It's like you're writing a spell. You're declaring a wish. Declaring a wish to the universe, and it's something that should be very isn't it ironic that I can't think of the word right now? It should be really just like honored. One thing that I find myself doing is looking to clean up my language, right? So that's when I said that, I noticed it that right away that I said it, and I didn't give it more energy, and I kind of canceled and cleared it because I realized, oh yeah, like I don't really want to give that any energy. I can observe something without putting more of my focus into it, and the second that I add my worry or fear to the situation, now I've started to solidify it into my reality. Otherwise, it could just be a passing thing that I'm observing. If I'm observing it a lot and it's coming up a lot, then it probably already is a solidified thing in my reality. And it could be a collective thing, and it could be something that I'm tied to, and that's all up to me to find out when I look into myself and know myself. But I can tell you that anything that's going to be in lack, it's fake. it's not true, because that's just tied to a belief. And sure, at some time that was something for us to experience. We wanted to know what it was like to be without. And that's so that we can appreciate when we are not without. That our gratitude is felt to the core, that we understand what it even is to be in gratitude. You know? So it's all perfect. We can't get this wrong. And when there's not a tool in the toolbox to deal with whatever's coming up, ask, ask and you shall receive. So ask the universe, what you should do, what's your next step. And just take one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. That is a means of transportation. And you're not stuck when you do that. All right. That's all for now.